people. Welcome everyone to the Charles River Dam Advisory Committee, meeting 13. I'm Ona Ferguson here with Maggie Ostus from the facilitation team. We are in deliberation. Very exciting. Maggie, could you put the link to the agenda in the chat for the participants? We are going to today be doing a lot of deliberation and discussion, and that means mostly talking about the first section. It's kind of the crux of the whole final report that will go to the select board, which is called our recommendations at the moment. And members of the public also have access to look at that draft, which is on the project website now, so that the members of the public can follow along. Committee members got this last night to take some time to read. Thank you, Maggie. So we're going to be going through that, and then we're going to talk about two aspects of that. Most importantly, the kind of first page or page and a half, whatever it is, for that our recommendations section. And then we'll also go through kind of what you can expect to see in the other sections that are right now just headings. And there is work that's been done to flesh those out. It just really wasn't ready to share yet. We were getting there, but it wasn't quite there. So we'll talk through that. And then we'll talk about what happens between now and a select board meeting in September. Those are our topics. I know we have a break scheduled for 5 o'clock. We'll just see kind of how our timing is running. We can be a little flexible tonight, I think. I'm not sure we need till 6:30. Let's just see how it goes. And just for everyone's knowledge, all the materials from all our previous meetings are on the project website. I invite you to take a look at those. We have some general ground rules, which are just very basic: to be concise, be respectful, and be constructive. And committee members, I'm just going to invite you to share your name and your affiliation sort of for the purposes of this project. And then, let's hold on that. We have right now 26 members of the public in attendance, in addition to the 13 committee members and staff who are visible here on the main screen. And tonight we are not having public comment. We have had significant public comment, and committee members received all the written public comment received since the last meeting, most current version yesterday. So you have that in writing. I trust you got a chance to look at that. And with that, let's do quick introductions. I'll just call on people if you'd say your name and affiliation, and we'll start with Claire and then Martin.
Hi everyone, I'm Claire Wendelli, Town of Natick Conservation Agent, Open Space Planner, and I am representing that position on this committee.
Thank you. Martin and then David Lotting.
Hi, I'm Martin Kessel, and I'm here a number of capacities, but I'm here as a town meeting member in Precinct 10, South Natick, and I'm also chair of the Open Space Advisory Committee, and I'm also an abutter on Water Street.
Thank you.
About the river, I think that was understood.
Let's go to David Lotting and then Janine.
Hi, I'm David Lotting. I'm representative of the Open Space Committee.
Thank you. Janine and then Jeremy.
I'm Janine Furr, and I represent the Historic District Commission.
Jeremy, then Jillian.
Hello, I'm Jeremy Marcet. I'm the Director of Public Works, and I'm on the committee in that capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Jillian and then Becca.
Hi, I'm Jillian Wilson Martin, the Sustainability Director.
Becca, then Christopher.
I'm Becca Sendna. I'm a Natick resident and I work in environmental and science communication.
Christopher, then Mike.
Hi, I'm Christopher Stillman. I'm with the Natick Conservation Committee and a colleague of Claire's.
Mike and then John.
Hi, I'm Mike Balcom. I'm Natick resident and live downstream on the river from the spillway.
Hi, John Marshall, Deputy Town Administrator of Operations.
Thank you, John, Aaron, and then Bill.
Aaron Spelker, representing the Commission on Disability for the town of Natick.
Bill, and then David Yancey.
Bill McDowell, town engineer.
And David Yancey. And it's *6, I think, to unmute. Can you do it?
David Yancey, a Natick resident, representing the Nipmucks.
Thank you. Great. We need to approve the meeting summary from last week. This has all been very fast and furious for those of you who are behind the scenes. I sent out a note last week saying we were going to adjust it, and then I realized we didn't actually have time to make adjustments. So I think we need to, if it's okay with people, just vote on it as is to get it up there. And I see Martin pointing to where you are in my screen.
I can tell if my virtual hand, it kind of fades into my bookcase, but anyway, thank you. Yeah, what I saw didn't seem to reflect the order of the meeting, because normally the public comments are at the end, and the version I saw had the public comments at the end, whereas they were actually at the beginning. Of course, that's the section that's like 60 pages long, so maybe you want to just have a reference to the fact that they're in the appendix. And then there's also another section after public comments, which was what it was called. It was called Reflections. Oh dear, my phone is ringing now. I'll try to shut it off. Okay, which was called Reflections from Committee Engagement in the Community, which actually people talked about a lot of things, but that section should be, I think, reflected in the minutes as well.
I'm not totally sure I understand that second point, Martin. Can you just say it one more time?
In the last agenda, after public comments, there was a section called Reflections from Committee Engagement in the Community, which was a separate section from deliberation. And I didn't recall seeing that section of the meeting in the minutes.
In the summary. Thank you. Jillian.
Actually, I had a question for John, because I know that in practice, we've always had the minutes posted or approved at our next meeting, but I don't think we're required to post something that's not ready. What's your perspective on that, John?
The goal is to have them approved as soon as they're ready. So if the committee hasn't had an opportunity to review them or feels like there's more work that needs to be done on them, they can certainly be delayed till the next meeting. But I think the committee should be comfortable in terms of the minutes and that they're reflective of what took place at the last meeting. So if we feel they're not ready, they can certainly be delayed to be posted till the next meeting.
So we can make reference to where the public comment is per Martin's comment, and we can also make sure there's clarity on the committee engagement kind of discussion piece. So then, given that we're going to adjust that, I think we can come back and we can get you a slightly revised version. So stay tuned for that. All right. We're ready to go into this next piece. For those, Martin, your hand is just left over, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'll take it too.
Okay, thanks. As a just reminder, and for anyone in the audience who wasn't here last time, just want to kind of name where we are in our trajectory for this process and what's coming up tonight and going forward. And last week at our meeting, we heard significant public comment, and then the committee did, as Martin named, reflect on public comment, the written and verbal, and also on other community engagement that they had done with various committees, with individuals, neighbors, friends, everybody. And then committee members were given a chance to share the key elements for them that have shaped where they are going in terms of this decision about the dam. And we went around and heard from everyone, and there was a pretty overwhelming agreement, to use the language that was in our decision document. And so now we're in a phase of drafting the recommendation from the group, from the most people, and we're going to have a minority element in there also, which we'll include in the report. And we had this kind of idea that we might be able to get a whole draft of this report because it would be very brief together by today for everyone to be looking at. In fact, several of us have been working hard, including some work on the weekend. Thank you to those of you who did that. You know who you are. And it just it wasn't ready to share. It didn't seem worth sharing with a big group of people when it's clear that a few of us could make it better. Although it has lots of great stuff and we're excited to share when it's ready. So today's meeting is going to focus on the first section, our recommendation. And then in the next few weeks, there will be a draft that goes out with the other sections of the report fleshed out. And then the committee will meet again to look over all of that and hopefully bless it. Might be a sort of two-step process in between now and the next session. So for the public, I want to just be clear that if you were here thinking we were going to sort of vote on a final thing today, there's not going to be a vote on a final thing today. Today, we're working on this one section and planning our activities for the next few weeks. And I think it's going to be really nice to have all of your takes on everything. Welcome, Kristen. Welcome, Dirk. Nice to have you both with us. And so I want to start by reading some remarks from, oh, wait, Aaron, you can share your own remarks because you're here, which is great.
I am here, yes.
Aaron didn't get to weigh in because he wasn't able to be at the last session. So we're going to have him kind of add in to the go around we did last time. So we all can hear his rationale and where he is on this. And then we'll get into this recommendation. So Aaron, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Everyone, thank you very much. I unfortunately was sick last week and thought I would be able to rally for the meeting, but just wasn't able to. So I do appreciate you giving me this time to speak this week. So I'm Aaron Spelker. I'm representing the Commission on Disability for the town of Natick. And as I look at this process and all the time that we've spent in all these meetings, for me, it comes down to an economic component, a cultural component, and an aesthetics component. From an economic standpoint, the removal of the spillway, is a lower one-time cost. It's a lower maintenance cost, and it's an elimination of a liability exposure. So that is all kind of in favor for that. Remove the spillway. From a cultural standpoint, I agree with some of the other committee members who said, this history goes well beyond our time here in Natick. And the river was, probably been a river for thousands of years. And I think it's right to return it to what it naturally was. And then finally, the aesthetics. I know this is an important piece and landmark here in the town of Natick to a lot of people. But no matter what happens, whether it's a removal of the spillway or maintain the spillway, it is going to have to aesthetically change. And I think with a lot of good design and planning and development and funding, we can make this a beautiful space, with the decision that we make. Now, as a Commission for Disability member, our kind of real sight is not as much on the spillway removal or not removal. We're just going to vote for what we think is best for the town from that standpoint. But we are really looking at what does this space become after this work is done. We want to make this space accessible for those who are disabled in town so that we can enjoy it as much as those who are fully abled. So we really want to talk about the design and development, and I have kind of encouraged that as we do the report that we include what is going to be development costs. So we really talk about the all-in costs of this project, which is more than just the spillway. It is working the space and the parkland around it, because I want there to be an understanding from the town that we need funds for that to really make this a usable space from an aesthetic standpoint, but also for those in the community who might be disabled who also want to access and get down to the river and things like that. The other thing that I was really excited to hear about in the meeting last week as I listened to it was, I think when Bill was speaking about the engineering aspects of things, I had asked a question about whether there could be some sort of trench put in to help with the navigation through that spot in case there was low waterways, which I kind of got the sense from the response at the time that that wasn't really something that could be done, but it seems like from comments people made last week that that might actually be something that can be looked at. So I'm really favorable to exploring that more, making that part of the recommendation. So I'll be told, as a representative of the Commission on Disability, we are for the remove the spillway vote. We do want the report to reflect the complete all-in costs, which includes funding and development of the parkland around the site. And then we would like to see any more further information or exploration we can get around adding some sort of way to navigate that land by maybe digging a trench to help with the depth of the river through that space.
Thanks, Aaron. Great. That is a really nice segue, actually, to kind of go back to, oh, right, everybody's getting to their decision in different ways, right? Thinking about different elements of it. So let's go to, I think it's like, it looked like 3 pages, but it's really a page and a half of text that we sent, and we don't have slides on it. People will need to open it yourselves, or if we need to, we can share a screen, but let's just start at a sort of talking level. We want to hear what would make this work for you, what needs to be modified, so you feel good signing the recommendation. And I think I want to just name, we have 18 committee members, and right now we have 2 committee members who are likely submitting a kind of dissenting opinion, and we still want the recommendation to meet as many of their interests as possible. We want this to really comprehensively work as well as it possibly can. That's what we're going for here. So invite all of the members to share their thoughts, and I actually would like to give you all just 2 or 3 minutes to look it over. So if you haven't found it, go find it on the website. For members of the public and committee members, just remember kind of what you saw. Be quiet.
This is Aaron Spalger. Can I ask a favor for going forward?
Yes.
I was just noticing that the PDF is not reading for my screen reader. So if I could get like just a Word version just sent to me so I could more easily read that, that would be beneficial.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Aaron, I'll send you one right now.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Sorry about that. All right, committee. I have feedback from David Blees and Terry, who are not able to be here tonight on this, and maybe I'll just share their feedback and then we can get going. They responded to the what needs to be modified. So they feel good, supporting this recommendation piece. And Terry wrote, it is vital that the section beginning accompanying our advice, which would better be read as accompanying our recommendation, include in the clearest and strongest language the imperative that the select board plan for and identify funding for landscaping and amenities that are outside the scope of the dam project itself. The current points dance around it. Keeping the place special is meaningless without clarifying what that means. So then she said with that modification, she would be comfortable signing on to something with that recommendation language. David Blees writes, he thoroughly approves of the recommendations and tone in this, and that he's very aware, that he and some others are sort of in a minority of upstream abutters advocating for spillway removal, and he appreciates kind of the report being a place we could help alleviate some concerns if we do it right. And he sends thanks and regards to everyone here tonight. So that's what I have from our 2 members who couldn't be with us. Except is maybe there's there may be a couple more, sorry. All right, hands, anybody want to jump in? What do you see? What do you like? What needs to be modified? If it's like a tiny wording thing, you can just give that to Maggie or me. separately. I think we want to try to kind of focus on the important elements here. Dirk, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I like also, I second what was said about the recommendation and its tone. I would also say the structure of this report, including the sections, to be fleshed out, seems spot on to me. I endorse the comment that Terry put in, and broaden that to include other aspects that are beyond the structural river/dam, core of the matter that we're looking at, including accessibility and so forth. Our bodies are somewhat unique in my experience, although maybe not completely unique, in that we're an advisory body for the select board to largely to choose between two major routes around the core, but also to we've certainly taken it upon ourselves, and I think we're somewhat expected to take it on ourselves to consider what does a scope look like of dealing appropriately with this area, with this space, with this asset and amenity to the community. That said, we're not the domain experts in a lot of those ancillary aspects of recreation, of accessibility, of it would be great to have historic educational aspects to what's there in the park and so forth, and we're not the domain experts in those. We can certainly undertake a process of some months, or hopefully not years more, to have presented to us and to get into detail, but I don't think we should be getting into detail. I think we should be making a high-level education on those ancillary matters, high-level recommendation, and weighing in on substantial and sufficient funding. But I don't know that we can determine really what that is. I think we can suggest maybe a range, and certainly suggest consultation with those domain experts that can scope these ancillary aspects appropriately, in keeping with what is adopted of our recommendation to take seriously the appearance, the accessibility, the recreational opportunity, and so forth. I would hate to see us put out something that looked like a budget that we really haven't vetted, and we're maybe not the best people to vet, and if we were to become better people to vet, it would extend our lifetime more than maybe I'm looking forward to. I'm saying none of this to throw a wet blanket on the thought of really a substantial project. As those of you who are on the committee know, I've spoken several times and continue to speak for a very substantial, serious treatment of this area as a real marquee asset to the town, and we should be looking to invest in it in that manner. What that number looks like, what the structure of that budget looks like, I don't begin to know.
Thank you, Dirk. Others, what do you think as you read this? Is it working?
This is Aaron. Can I go?
Please.
So just going off what was just said, I mean, I would like to see, I know there's been some preliminary landscape things, I don't know if we can kind of, along with our report, get a couple of, rough quotes from a couple of different vendors about what can be done with this space and some renderings to kind of go along. My very large concern is we're going to do this project and nothing's going to be mentioned of a range of cost for the development of the parkland around it, and have that in people's mind's eye of, we are going to do something with the space. It is going to cost something. We do need to prepare for that cost to go along with what is done with the spillway. I want that at the forefront because I don't want it to be a surprise later or have it be shortchanged on the back end, which would really do an injustice to this space. So I don't know, what we're able to do or not do, but the more we can do to go along with the recommendation, I would like to see that.
Thank you, Aaron. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. It sounds like, and I really do appreciate people on this committee that have more experience in town matters and funding and how the game works, so to speak. But it seems to me that Terry's recommendation that we have some real language in there to ensure funding is what we're looking for. But there are challenges on, we don't know what that funding is. I think from my perspective, what little I know about how our town works is that the select board needs to put something in front of town meeting with dollars on it. And how do we ensure that they do it to an extent that meets our desire for this area? I don't know. And like I said, I need to allow more experts in this world figure that out. But I think in this document, we're trying to ensure funding and then let them decide what that funding is, but meeting our minimum goals of what the park system should be. I don't think it's quite there yet because it does dance around some of that things. I don't know if we allude to minimum funding or involvement of different parts of the park. Do we somehow ensure that the multi-purpose park and the South Bank are involved in this development? I don't know. I mean, that's all things we need to consider, but ensuring the funding, I think, is what the minimum I'm looking for anyway. It sounds like others may be too.
Thank you, Mike. Chris and then Jillian.
Yeah, I mean, to avoid adding a lot of planning costs to this, I see this document as kind of a guidance to get those subject matter experts on, bidding, figuring out solutions, bringing in, wetland ecologists and accessibility experts. I think there are plenty of people that have that purview and are really good at it. And I would hope that we would go through the process of letting the select board know that we think it's important that they get those subject matter experts on hire to come up with a plan that is palatable to everybody. Because I think when we remove something that has this much community goodwill, we need to replace it with something that is equally wonderful or equally as endearing for future generations. That's me.
Jillian, go ahead.
I like that language that you just shared at the end of your statement, Chris, about replacing with something equally beautiful, not maybe more beautiful. I think, like, listening to Mike and Chris and Dirk and thinking about Terry's comment, I feel like if we were to, in the document, just say that the select board should appropriate funding for this and not necessarily say how much, but then even to potentially add something that says that a design for this area should be happening concurrently with the design for the removal or something to that effect, just because we want that idea of like, as the construction vehicles are leaving, that the cleanup of the parks is like, that is turning into the parks we want them to be. And to Chris's point about, you know, telling the select board as a next step that they should be hiring the experts to develop that plan, and we've talked about how there would be a different community engagement around what should be in those parks that goes beyond us. We could say that they should begin that as well.
I think some of this is in here. I'm just going to read a few sentences from what's in the page and a half that we all have, which is the first paragraph or two and bullet list is sort of around construction of taking down the spillway. And then the next paragraph or two and bullet list is more around like placemaking and making sure this is special and beautiful and accessible. So accompanying our advice to remove the spillway, the committee recommends that the town ensure that this place remains special. The committee saw an outpouring of appreciation for this beloved area, and we agree. It's a special place with a deep history. Redesign and significant investment in the adjacent parks, including Grove Park, the South Natick Dam Park, and the multipurpose park for waterfront recreation and future maintenance is essential. A phased approach will be necessary as the natural river location and character is established, and the town should financially commit now to a reimagining of this unique and historically significant park system in its totality. Our hope is the select board takes a master plan approach that takes into account the unique aspects of each parcel, but functionally ties them together to provide a place for our community to meet, contemplate, and enjoy. The town must invest in this space for future use by its residents. And then there's a naming of key qualities and functions and elements to include. So that's what we have right now. Dirk, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that certainly sets the table. Another thing I'd like to bring up from contribution I've made in the past, a perspective that I thought was very important and compatible with my role representing the Finance Committee, is the idea, you know, a master planning approach can sound very phased and can sound very, you know, it includes stuff we'll get to someday. I think we want to head that one off at the pass. You know, irrespective of how granular and specific we get on budget, I think we want to drive home the idea of a master plan that is for reasonably near-term implementation, perhaps phased, but not an indefinite someday kind of thing. And specifically, I think the point that I've made a few times that it's really important to maximize our bite at the apple of review and permitting in this space, which can be very onerous. I think we should articulate that as part of the recommendation.
Thank you. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you. I think Dirk actually took a lot of what I was going to say as far as that goes. That it says the idea that redesign and significant investment is essential and should accompany this recommendation, just to tie those together, but that necessity, I mean, essential is a nice word, but that it is necessary to follow this recommendation that we made. And excuse me, just at the very beginning of that paragraph where it says accompanying our advice, it's like we should be accompanying our recommendation. And one last thing before I put my hand down is the first paragraph under our recommendation says enthusiastically, and I personally was not enthusiastic.
I think I got a comment similar to that from others. Thank you. Go ahead, Claire.
I have a couple of little language changes that I'll send to Ona and Maggie so I don't waste the committee's time with minor wordsmith issues. But I think that I like the sort of general flow of the recommendation at this point in time. I'm curious if we should be rearranging how this flows. I just worry that we're sort of putting the cart above the horse in terms of, writing, we want these elements included. But I think that the paragraph about ensuring that this remains special and understanding that it may need to be a phased approach should potentially come before that section on the project design elements. I just want to make sure that it's being highlighted, sort of echoing other people's comments, that funding for a park space is one of the highest priorities of this committee. I think that making that clearer earlier on in the memo is not a bad thing if others agree with that sort of reorganization.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I agree with Claire that, and I think it was going to where my head was at was how in the language do we really not just connect these concepts of spillway removal and park development, but they are one. Our recommendation, or at least my recommendation, does not exist one without the other. So I don't know how we do that. It's, in other words, it's not like, hey, let's remove the spillway and please, put some investment in this park that's falling into the river. So, I think it all has to be one, and it has to be done, more than a connection, but just kind of as one. So I think putting that first might help in that regard. And then just, I appreciate Dirk's comments on the master plan, because it does kind of give them an out that, hey, well, let's just make the plan and then we're done. I think we want to put something in front of the town to actually vote on funding that will get it all done. And perhaps the master plan might be a way that they can skirt that. So, that being said, it is going to be a phased construction, even outside of the permitting and everything else. We know it's not going to actually start for a year or two, or even more. We're going to have to wait for the river to make its adjustments, for some growth to come in, and to, all those kind of things to happen. And so I think it probably will be a revisit by a construction team to move some boulders or help the water go one way or the other. So again, I think making that this is one thing the town is voting on, and thumbs up, thumbs down, but that's the way it is. Because otherwise I would feel, I just would feel very disappointed if it went through and then in front of the town they said, yeah, we removed the spillway, and then everything just stopped. Because that's not where my heart's at.
Thank you. Becca?
Yeah, I think echoing some of that, but also just thinking, when I look at these bullet points, it is confusing to me that one is around sort of the removal and what's needed, and then the other's around park space. And I agree, Mike, I think you just said, in terms of integrating those, because I also feel like when I look at this, the first set of bullet points around, they're so different. One is around analysis. So I feel like we should acknowledge, we know there's analysis, we know there's permitting that needs to happen, maybe sort of the timeline for what needs to be there. And then sort of the piece around just the removal of the spillway. And then the park piece, but I feel like there's also potential for sort of a wish list or a priority list of, there needs to be something X. I'd say creation of riffles or other strategies to enable the sound of water. To me, that's maybe a wish list item. That's not essential. Like I guess I'm concerned. I don't want it to seem as if we're asking for the world and have it seem too like it's too much. And so where can we sort of put some priority to that? So I just said a whole bunch of stuff all jammed into one comment, but I'll mute now.
Thank you, Becca.
This is Aaron again. So in this report, we're putting numbers around what it costs to remove the spillway, correct?
We here at, I actually wanted, that's sort of a good invitation. I want to name what else is happening in the document. I think that will be helpful. So give me like 2 minutes, Aaron, and see if it answers your question.
Okay.
We are going to, and you see, people who are looking at the document will see the sections below. So we're going to have a section on the rationale, the kind of main reasons people have named for why they decided what they decided. Then we'll have the signatories, we'll have the dissenting view language, and then we have a like page-long description of our process, what we've done for anyone who hasn't been following along. And then we have just a page or two naming all the different supporting materials that we have, including to the cost presentations, to all the technical reports, to all the public input, the survey summaries, the public comment, the meeting summaries, the presentations, right? All of these things that you all know are on the website right now. Those will all be linked in the appendix rather than us making like a 700-page document. So Aaron, the report is really the group's recommendation with what you sort of, and why, and then what you did. It's not a technical document itself.
Well, I guess, well, yeah, I mean, so there is a thing that's talking about the cost of spillway removal versus cost of maintaining the spillway. And I was just wondering, again, why can't we, include in the appendix, here is some quotes on cost of development of that space? Or do we just really not have time to get quotes like that at this point?
Ona, can I take that a little bit maybe and help shed some light into it? I think when we provided some concept elements in terms of what could be in the park, it was really meant to be high level and kind of get an understanding of what might be possible, but it wasn't really the exact elements that are going to fit in there. And even when they were shared, there was some comments amongst the committee in terms of, oh, that's nice, but oh, I don't think that belongs there. It does really take a deeper dive to kind of get into that. And I think it's really difficult to put an exact number around it. My thought, and just listening and hearing people speak, is maybe to call out some of the elements that should be included within it, accessibility, and I think it's listed in the bullet section here, but that's certainly stuff that the committee could say, this is what was heard in terms of the park elements that should be included within it. And there should be a design element to incorporate these features within the parks, and that should be designed so that it can sync up as construction moves forward with the removal.
So would wording maybe work that says, we recommend that the selectmen put forth adequate funding to ensure that these elements are adequately satisfied, and then list the accessibility and a launch of boats into the river, or whatever the other, a picnic area, or whatever the various elements that we want to show be reflected in that park space. Is that kind of the way to do it?
I think, something along those lines, because I think it's really hard to dive into the details of what the features would be without getting a different public engagement. And, we're kind of at that point with this committee where I think the committee recognizes that there is design work, or there is work that needs to go into the parks. But there's a different group that really needs to dive into the weeds on that and take a little bit of a different look. But it does sound like, in talking to some of the other committee members, that there is certainly a need to match those up together. So spillway removal needs to have a park enhancement as part of that, and redesign of some of those park elements.
So for us to, in this document, tie that, basically, we want the select board to either follow our recommendation or not, but if they're following our recommendation, is there a way that we can say, like, maybe not specific elements of the park, but that they should, before they put this in front of the town, actually come up with a design, get a team together or hire an outside, whatever their process is, to come up with at least a starting design to say, okay, when the spillway is removed and the construction is done, this is our goals, and we can maybe set some of those goals for them, and we kind of have in that list. And then down the line, there's going to be lots of park space, but we don't know exactly how the public's using it. The public probably doesn't know how they're using it yet, because some of it doesn't exist. So I think that's an important part of this, is that, I picture down the line, maybe there's a theater in the round somewhere, or some place that might fit somewhere in our community that our community wants. But right now, it's just, I don't think it's the time to go that far. So, I think we're looking for the minimum investment in the park, maybe by tying a recommendation to, okay, hire design and come up with a design for this park without the spillway and completely fund it. I think that accomplishes, with our goals of accessibility and so forth and so on, that accomplishes what we want as a committee, but it still leaves it wide open in that how that park will eventually, in the next 5 to 10 years, how it will serve our community and how great it will be.
Thanks, Mike.
On Iris's report, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was just gonna I was gonna get it out. And to build on what you were saying, Mike, the thing that worries me a little bit about waiting to ask for any funding to move forward until a park is designed means that much longer of the dam being in poor condition, because you're basically like adding this chunk of time before you ask for anything. So I wonder if there's a kind of a in-between where the town, for like, maybe this is going too into the weeds, but where the town funds the design of both at the same time before funding the whole project, if that makes sense. So just maybe an interim step, and maybe that's going too far in terms of what we should be recommending, but I appreciate what you're saying about you don't want the town to do this project if they're not going to do the rest of it.
Can I ask a maybe a thought process or a thought thing for the committee members? So if you took the two options, so we have, maintain the spillway, which we know comes with removing the trees, and functionally the space would, other than that, not relatively change. So there would be some sort of money needed to put in place to kind of spruce up the fact that the trees are coming down, and we're going to need to do something with that space to kind of make it look nice. But with the remove the spillway, you're really kind of drastically changing the complete layout of that, which requires much more investment in doing something with it. And if you're going to be doing that much, you might as well look at the entire space and do it in its entirety. That's kind of how, at least I personally look at it. Both of them require some sort of development. I think the remove the spillway requires more development because there's more going on there. And if you're going to touch that much of it, you might as well touch it all. But is that kind of what everybody else is thinking as well as around the development aspect of things? Because you're not going to, I mean, if they're not going to, does it change your answer if they say, okay, we're not going to really invest that much in the parkland? Are you now going back to maintain the spillway? I'm personally not, but I would be very disappointed with them not funding making the parkland nice.
Thank you. Anyone feel free to pick that up, and we're going to take Martin, then Chris, then Dirk.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about the park, and I agree with them all. It should be integral to the whole recommendation. Dirk had something in the chat which I think is pretty good. The timing is critical, because I know it takes time to design a park. Maybe John Marshall has a better sense of that. I was on the Easton Navy Yard design committee, among other things I've done, and it took maybe, I don't know, it seems like about a year of work to do that with the consultants. But I think maybe we can recommend that we start the process, and that And then also, as people have said, that there be some commitment to funding, although it's hard to commit to something when you don't know how much it's going to cost. I think we do have a general idea of how much it's going to cost based on other parks. But perhaps these bullet points of what we want in park design can be starting points in the design committee, which goes through a big public process as we do. And we'll just look at that. We'll get more bullet points and have other ideas and things to add to that design. And we don't want to inhibit them from coming up with more good ideas just because we have some.
Great, thank you. Chris, and then Dirk, and then Bill.
Yeah, I hate bringing in just, it's not contrarian, but I definitely have a feeling that when it comes to the permitting process, a lot of this stuff needs to get in place pretty quickly. And I mean, Claire, perhaps you can chime in if I'm incorrect, but I mean, I'm of the assumption that once we allow the river to start migrating and solidifying where it wants to be naturally, you're going to have wetland species that are going to pop up. And I think once you hit those, you're triggering certain requirements that, it may be a matter of how long they're established, but that permitting gets more complex when those species take hold. You have to work around them and you have to design around them. And so that's why I kind of picture this as a process that's going to need to have some sort of preemptive start, you know, in regards to the permitting.
Yeah, Chris, I think that the wetland areas that are created by a spillway removal will qualify as bordering vegetated wetlands even before the plant species start to revegetate, just based on the hydrology.
Yeah.
So I expect that the permitting process will probably be very similar, but I think it's been mentioned by a couple of other folks that the permitting process for a removal is going to take at least 2 years, which definitely gives the town time to even just get preliminary design plans developed for a park so that all of that permitting can be addressed in one go.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Dirk, and then Bill.
There we go. I appreciate, Aaron, your you know, what you've posed as a sort of thought experiment, and want to respond to that. And response is that, first of all, it's a little bit at this point in the land of what if Eleanor Roosevelt could fly, because you know, I think for a variety of reasons that I spoke to at our last meeting, I am quite convinced that the right branch between the two major options with regard to the river is the removal of the spillway. But I do think one of the, you know, perhaps one of the reasons that we're in the situation we're in is because incrementally over decades, we did take a bit of a hands-off approach, a bit of a, well, it's done, we can just enjoy it now approach. And the professionals will look after what it takes to, you know, inspect it every now and then. I would like to say that the difference that if I somehow were to wake up tomorrow and say, oh my God, we should have the spillway there still, which will not happen, but I'll take your thought experiment. If I were to, I would still feel it's very important to make, you know, it might differ in incremental ways, certainly in certain design ways, it probably would differ, but I would like to think that I would recommend very substantial attention to the park at this point, whichever option we were to be pursuing with regard to the river. I'm not sure that belongs in the recommendation, but I think that spirit does. The other thing, I think language will matter here. I think referring to the development of a project, perhaps multi-phase, rather than a series of projects, would be appropriate. The more ways we can phrase this in a way that makes it a unified attention to this area and the river in it and the dam in it, the better.
Thank you. Bill and then Mike.
Thank you. I know Mike had talked about elements, to be included, and I know in Iris's presentation at the beginning of that, she had maybe 4 or 5 thoughts of what she was trying to bring to the space with her sketches. So I think that might be a good place to start. Access to the river being important, accessibility, to the river being important, visibility being important, tranquility. There were several different words that she used in there, but I think that would create the ethos. So that's already kind of been created for us. And I agreed with all of what she said, although I don't feel like some of the representations necessarily reflected that. But I thought her bullet points of what it was that she was trying to bring to the space is a place to start with that. And I very much appreciate what Aaron said about, changing the spillway, changing the river is, I think that the language that you have in the report, that a phased approach may be necessary as we find out where it was that the river was. So if I don't build a boat access that's, doesn't actually make it down to the water or something like that. So I do see, I thought the language in the report so far was fairly balanced as far as that may be necessary. But I do agree attaching work to the park is something that we definitely want to emphasize as part of this report, and making that, not sort of like that's a really good idea, but it's like it is necessary. It is something that we feel as a committee is very important to our decision.
Thanks, Bill. Mike.
Yeah, those are all great points. I think I don't see a lot of disagreement among us, which is hopefully, makes it easy to write this up. But, to kind of carry on Aaron's thought of, spillway removal versus dam repair, and just looking back at that other choice, the GZA report that put it in poor condition, there's a whole bunch of bullet points there that point out things that have nothing to do with the dam that they see as that needs to be fixed. There's the cast wall that's deteriorating, falling into the river. There's big stones that are falling in. There's a whole bullet point list of it. So at the very minimum, I think that was going to be part of it anyway, and it still needs to be part of it. We need to fix that. So, I think what we're asking for is, hey, if let's do a little reimagining, kind of what is best for this community in 2022. What do we want to see there? I think that's important. And I think time is a good thing, because it sounds like we're going to have plenty of time. The town's going to have plenty of time to look at this because of the permitting. But in that time, we don't want to lose this urgency of connection. So I think that's what our language really needs to reflect. And I don't know, I mean, this, again, I don't have a lot of savvy. For my day job, I do sell big concepts, big money things to private people. So I am comfortable getting people to take risks, but I don't know, I know the town and government's different. So, we had another budget. We kind of have an idea what the budget to repair is and what that would have given us. If the select board, would it be wise for them to ask for that same budget, which would include spillway removal, design and park development, and even some maintenance dollars? Because if we're developing park areas, there's going to be more maintenance involved. And as Dirk said, there probably wasn't enough maintenance up to today because of, you really can't walk outside that pathway on the earthen dam. And that's unfortunate because it's beautiful there. So anyway, I don't know if that makes sense, because that budget's X amount bigger. I think that'll get us, is if they're following the goals and the design team are following the goals and everything. But I totally leave it to the experts in this world, which I know there are a few here. So thanks.
Thanks. Dirk, and then I'm gonna see if Bill or John have responses to that in particular, the kind of money piece. And then I think we have sort of general agreement on this section and a few changes. So I'm gonna name that in a minute or two, and then we'll take a break. I think we're almost there. So if you have final thoughts that you haven't raised yet, now is going to be a good time on this particular section. Dirk, go ahead.
Sure. I want to respond to Mike's last point. And it's one.
Dirk,
I'm not comfortable with it though. When I've hello?
You're a little
Hello?
glitchy. Do you want to turn off your video and see if we can hear you better?
Will do. So where was I? Let me start again. I appreciate Mike's last point. It's one that has kind of been hanging around in the back of my head. But I want to kind of push back on it because as I've contemplated it, the idea, just, budget it for what the restoration budget would look like and use the difference. I think that's more than just a little bit shy of the need. When I look at what's been done with smaller and less sort of marquee or consequential park spaces in town and what it's cost, I think we need to think about something that's bigger than just scoping it as if we were doing restoration and doing removal instead. I think it's a substantially bigger scope measured in millions, not in hundreds of thousands or, a million plus. And I don't know quite how to express that. I do think that there are some thoughts that have occurred to me. We all know from what we've heard that it's more likely that there will be sources of funding externally from grants and so forth, from higher levels of government, from foundations and so forth, with the river and dam approach that seems to be emerging as our consensus. I think that if we come up with a ballpark scope that we can be comfortable with, I think we could underscore the importance of attention to these other areas by maybe expressing in our recommendation an explicit preference that most or all of the funding of the project that is not required due to third parties willing to assist with the core environmental part of the project should be repurposed and redirected to these other important parts of the project that we're talking about. That's a thought that's occurred to me as a way to, as I say, to underscore the importance of not just throwing a bone to these other priorities, but really taking them very seriously.
Thank you, Dirk. Here's where I think we are right now. I think we have generally a lot of support for the content that's in this page and a half, with some good suggestions for reorganization and tightening and really knitting together pieces that, for those of you who didn't see the early draft, which is most of you, originally were really quite distinct recommendations. Like we're packaging them into one, I think, at this point. So we're going to work on that, and we want to make our language very clear, and we're going to talk about this investment somehow, this like needing real resources and a real focus on making this place what it deserves to be, right? For the future. So that's where I think we are. We on this section, Maggie and I really invite anybody to send us any suggestions of words. You can individually just email us and we can compile those for those of you who are working on the drafting. I think we should take a 10-minute break, let everybody stretch, shake yourself out, and then we will at 5:20 we'll talk about the other sections and kind of what's going in there and how we're getting from here to the September select board meeting. So see you at 5:20. Thank you, everyone.
do.
Hi, Erin. And hi, everyone. Hope everyone at least stood up out of your chair. Maybe got a sip of water, you know. All right, this next piece is, I think, going to be, oh, Maggie's helping me. Maggie, you put in Maggie had a synthesis of a few of the key things that we just heard around connecting to the parks into everything. And Maggie, let me see if I can find it to share. Can't find it. Maggie, do you mind unmuting and just pointing me?
Yeah, sorry. I can also just read and people can add in, I guess. Noting, I think this is Dirk's point that language is important here. We need to phrase this recommendation in a way that makes this that draws unified attention to all aspects of this area. I think the language that you put in the chat was our recommendation does not exist without substantial and sufficient attention, not only to the river and dam, but to the park as well. I heard multiple people note that the timing of park design should coincide with the design of the spillway removal for the ease of permitting, and also start getting this all done in a comprehensive, cohesive way. The town needs to be investing in both of those items concurrently. And that the investment in the park design will also include probably securing some subject matter experts to lead the design of different elements. Apologies for my dog, it's almost dinner time for her. And that the ethos for the park design, I think Bill mentioned, Iris did a nice starting thing to guide that park design, those kind of elements that she called out at the beginning of her presentation, so we can call those out for the town as well. And then I think, Dirk, the point that you mentioned right before we went to break was highlighting in the recommendation that the town should be pursuing external funding sources to fund this work, and that any money freed up by third-party investment in this process should then be invested in those park elements for the surrounding area. I don't know if there was anything else that people wanted to lift up from that conversation, but those were some, just thinking about some of the concrete points we wanted to give to the drafting team to tie that all together.
And Maggie and I will be going through the notes from that discussion also, kind of a little more fine-tooth comb-y. Thanks, Maggie. That's helpful. I think with no hands going up immediately, my instinct is to take us into the next pieces here. And actually, in a minute, I'm like all of a sudden roasting in the sun. So if you look in the rest of your document, you'll see a few sections, and I think we want to talk about a couple of them tonight. So the next section, and those of you who are helping, oh, Kristen, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. I've been trying to follow along as best I can. I'm on the land right now, desperately trying to figure out how to water our blueberries and corn. I've been trying to follow along, and I don't know the correct placement, and I'm open to support around this or just conversation at another time. I'm following everything so far, echoing a lot of things shared. I just want to make sure that there might be space. Some of the feedback I've received is that the testimony that I provided and just hearing a lot of folks affirm wanting to make sure that, we're listening to the Indigenous people of the place. I'm wondering how the language in the recommendation can be framed in such a way that isn't just about our memory and use, but an active ongoing relationship. And I don't know if this recommendation is the place for that. I just really want to, I think it's the lack and the severing of the relationship that likely could have actually, who knows? From my viewpoint, it's like if there had been an ongoing active relationship with Indigenous peoples of this place, maybe it would have saved us some time, right? Like maybe a lot of the same values and ways that people were receptive to what was shared would have been a given. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, it might just be a little bit of language to add in of like, you know, a recommendation to continue the ongoing relationship with the, you know, the original stewards of the land. I don't know. I don't want to get political. I guess I just want to advocate for my people that oftentimes were really put in the past as a memory. But I think what has come to surface in this process is that we're still here and actively caretaking and using and there. And if folks, it sounds like it resonated with a lot of folks that our ideologies and our worldviews and values are contribute to a lot of what people are looking for. How can that come to life in this recommendation as well? I know it's not the center, and I really do believe that there could just be some short words. I don't know what they are yet. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, and I'm happy to follow up outside of this, but thought it would be important to bring into this conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen. It's actually a really nice transition from that sort of what people want to see, and we can look at more language in there and into the rationale piece, because I think it's one of the key elements in there of the why, right? Why this matters.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. I want those of you who were working on the rationale so far, and I think that's Janine and Mike and Jillian, maybe, like who's been kind of helping to start getting this going and starting to seed what's in here. I would like to invite you to share kind of the key pieces in each section, not to read them. And Maggie and I can help like flag some key content that we see in there so far, but to share with the committee, here's the sort of logic that we're starting to try to lay out, drawn from what everyone said last week, right? That's the source of this. And then I want to similarly invite Martin and David Lotting to share what they are drafting to put into the dissenting views piece right now, so people know what's coming with that piece and what's going to sit there. Otherwise, I don't think we need to go through like the process, and the appendices we'll send to you. You can look at. It's like they're pretty straightforward. I'd like to talk about these other pieces for a little bit. I don't know, Janine or Mike or Jillian, would one of you, we're workshopping this real time now. We didn't prepare this piece. It's a very, very rapid. Mike, you want to start?
Sure. I don't have it in front of me, but I do remember a lot of it. And in the PDF that is shared to the public, I think that's really the heart of how we came to this decision is the next piece there, our rationale. And Kristen, you were definitely heard by a lot of people. That your perspective is reflected in our rationale for sure. I know for most people, we kind of put this rationale, the A, B, C, D, E, kind of in order of importance, but it's probably not the same order for everyone, but maybe a general order for the committee. And it's basically just language that describes what put our heads where they are today, and why we're going that way. Ecology and community memory were the top two, and that made sense to me. But I guess anyone could, and then cost and liability, as I said last week, was probably least important of kind of the major concerns, although obviously cost is always important, but it just seems, for this kind of important project, that seemed less so. But I think it's in this document, it's reflected more so, because I think other people on this committee, probably rightly so, think it's an important issue. So in community memory, I know we did talk a lot about the Native perspective and how respecting that. I think a lot of community members, from what I heard in their their input also respected that. And I think that should be carried through all the way to the design of whatever parks end up around this part of the river. You know, the original settlers to that area, I think are a very important part of the history. So I don't have, again, I don't have it in front of me, but I was happy the way it was developing. And I looked at that rationale as kind of, if anyone wants to know why we decided what we decided, that's where you go.
Thanks, Mike. Claire.
I just want to sort of make a recommendation based on Kristen's most recent point, and I'm wondering if we should be shifting the language of community memory to community value or cultural value to sort of bring it more into the present and not just focus on the past.
Thank you. Janine, do you want to add in onto what Mike was saying in terms of sort of key components in there or anything else?
Well, I think he kind of covered it. We have quite a lot of writing on the ecological reasons that we chose to go with breach as the preferred solution. And we spoke of the different engineering options that we looked at and the different I lost my train of thought, but we covered fish, microorganisms, and the kind of crisis we're in environmentally with global warming. We didn't use that term, but the warming of the river and the lack of nutrients downstream because the dam prohibits the microorganisms from circulating. And we then, in terms of community memory, Kristen, I think, quoted you in terms of sort of the future, the core belief in the lessons of nature and wildlife and the people, and how the spirit of those things will carry us into a sustainable future with respect and learning from them. So I feel that the Indigenous views are well covered. And then we also included the kids, which I was wrong. It was not Kennedy School. It was Wilson School, who voted to unanimously to breach. So in terms of the community values, we're covering the past, the future, and in that one big bite. Then in the costs, I had sort of globally handled it and what I wrote up, but then we basically did, Jillian kind of put the specific costs in, and we expressed that it was easy for us to choose the more fiscally responsible option. And we have a scale item, which was about, let's see, that was an odd choice of
No,
term.
I think we're changing. There were a few items that were sort of not, we hadn't.
We're not talking about those yet? Okay.
settled.
Never
No,
mind.
we can talk about them. I think there's a liability piece, like the risk of
Oh, yes.
loss of life downstream that many of you mentioned in your decision making. And then a few other pieces that just haven't kind of been organized and grouped yet, but around navigation discussions that we had and safety related to the choice of spillway removal and what sort of those elements, and then the connection of this river to the larger river system, which might be in the I'm not
the scale
if that got moved in. Okay, and then beauty and aesthetics, which many of you mentioned as wanting to name that has potential also for the restoring the river option. So putting those all together. So those are the elements you will, right now it's like 7 or 8 page. That section might be 5 or 6 pages, the rationale piece. We'd like to make it a little tighter, a little more streamlined so that people will read it, because we want the select board to really read and absorb this. We want it to be clear. So that's what we're working toward.
Yeah, there's a lot in there for sure. And it really resonates, and, maybe the language needs to change here and there, but I agree that, tightening it up. So, I'd like to think that this recommendation is referred to as this process goes on. So I think, we need to the language does need to be clear, as clear as we can make it, but it's not really a contract either, right? So it doesn't have to be, I look at it in my world, we have these meetings where we come to a spirit and intent agreement, and that's kind of what we're coming here. It's not a legal agreement, it's not a contract. So, so I think we just need to sharpen our pencils and be expressive without limiting what we want to say. And I don't think, that's the challenge, and why it's such a meaty document now is because we are really incorporating some wonderful input from this committee and from the community. So there's some work to do, but there's some great stuff. I wish we could keep it as is and then just make a shorter one for the select board, because it's something that it's a nice document.
Yeah, I would agree with Mike on it. I feel like we do need to be a little more succinct, but I also feel like our committee's worked on this for 16 months and we've learned a lot, and we also can't expect that this will be read in accompaniment with all of the background materials. So I do feel like we actually have to bring up certain points that we know the community is maybe confused about, or like the real, like the background on why we're getting to that rationale, not just say, oh, we know it's better for the river to not have a dam there. We kind of need to explain why it's better for the river, but not to the detail of what we heard from Dr. Roy. We can like summarize that. And we had over 40 plus hours of meetings plus presentation. So I want to just flag, I don't think it will end up being as short of a document as I think we all initially hoped. And I think that's okay, because it's not going to be the, thousands of pages from everything else we've done. It'll still be a shorter thing. But I thought there was some really good stuff in there too. And it's about striking that balance too, that is reflective of everyone in the committee, and making sure that we're really all clear, and striving to also be sensitive about like making it feel political or things like that, like really wanting to get like the language right so we all feel good about it.
Thanks, Jillian. Claire, did you want to jump in? See a hand.
Sorry, I was just trying to change some of my settings and I accidentally raised my hand. I'm good at the moment.
I want to invite David, Lotting, and Martin to share, if you are willing, kind of the key elements you were drafting for I keep calling it 17 different things. Dissenting views is what it's called at the moment.
I think David's going to start.
David?
See there? All right.
Yep. Hello.
Great. Hi.
Yeah, well, so Martin and I have been working on drafting I guess what we're calling it is a minority report at this point. So we don't have a final draft, but we are, I guess, looking at two major issues. One is aesthetics and the other is navigability. So from the aesthetics point of view, I think that, many of the consultant reports we saw gave the impression that dam removal was the obvious choice for any dam. And many of them were relics of industrial time, and they don't serve any real useful purpose, commercial purpose, and generally no aesthetic purpose. Our dam is pretty much exactly the opposite. We have a graceful spillway design, the flowing water, the beautiful mill pond, look just as they did in the 1930s. So it's hard to believe that on that basis, they really have a reason to just be removed. We went on field trips, some of us on the committee, to Paxton and Worcester in November. We saw two dams that were restored. They were renovated and restored. They're both publicly owned, and the reasons given for the restoration was their aesthetic appeal, which very similar to ours. I think if in comparison, I think ours would be would be quite a few steps above in terms of its scenery and appeal. So at our committee meetings, we heard from many residents about their profound connections to the spillway. We're certainly aware of that by some of the reaction we've gotten, the comments we've gotten, the public comments that the committee has received. And another thing we took into account is the abutters. The abutters really have received scant attention in our discussions, and while there's not very many of them, I think we ought to at least find a way to consider and acknowledge their situation as we weigh the choices. So from an aesthetic point of view, I just have a hard time weighing the hoped for benefits that we are seeing for removing the obvious valuable and appreciated public amenity. So in a summary, in a nutshell, that's it.
Thank you. Martin?
Yeah, so the navigability argument is pretty much as I put it in last week's meeting. It was just last week, wasn't it? Yeah, last week's meeting. So I'll just give an outline. So one is the historic canoeing, which has gone on since the late 1880s. The different surveys and reports that have recommended a bit more canoe and kayak launches to make it easier for people to canoe and kayak. The question of how navigable will it be, which I think I've still heard some questions about whether we're interpreting Stantec correctly by our kind of dismal interpretation of what the river depth is going to be. So I had to go through that again and basically referred to the depth map, which we did talk about a lot. There's also a river speed map, which I think we never had time to talk about, which has a river moving at about out to 3 feet per second, which has issues with navigability too, unless you're a whitewater canoeist. And then the historic rapids issue. So all three of those are going to impact the navigability in some fashion, and I tried to summarize that. Then there's another issue with whether you have the option of, if you're inhibited upstream for part of the year or most of the year, whether you can go downstream of the dam to where we live on Water Street. Somehow we have we have deep water we can navigate pretty much year round. Sometimes it's a little fast, but it's pretty much year round navigation. And the problem there is that the public doesn't have access to what we have. And both David and I subconsciously may have been thinking about this, but we only actually articulated it within the last week, which is the town had the option and had started the process of purchasing 22 Pleasant Street, which would have been added to the Honeywell baseball fields and provided canoe launches, kayak launches for the public downstream of the dam, which might have served as an alternative to the upstream canoe and kayaking, but that was rejected then by a later town meeting in 2019. So it seems as though this would be kind of a second hit at the possibility of ordinary citizens being able to canoe and kayak. So that's basically it. And I wanted to also mention something about the process and the all the input we've received from the public, which hopefully will be in the process section. So I hope you don't mind if I touch on that, because if some of this is not in the process section as it emerges, we might include it in our section, which is basically to give credence to all the people who are not going to be happy by this decision. And we've heard some really heartfelt talk about people's relationship to the dam and that site and the spillway. And, people on this committee have said that that's kind of, that gets second, that is much less important than all of the other considerations. But we think that they deserve some consideration and acknowledgement, at least if we're not going to, if we're going to take away something that's near and dear to them. So, also, the beginning of this report indicates that this is an overwhelming decision by the committee, which is the case. That's true. But I don't think it's an overwhelming choice of the community. I think it may be majority choice of the entire town, but I don't think it's as overwhelming as I don't want to make it out as everybody's going to be happy with this. I think some people are not going to be happy with this, and the sooner we acknowledge it, I think we're in better shape. So there's been, I think we should mention the huge number of written comments, which is mind-boggling, the number of oral comments on both sides of the issue. There's been organized political campaigns on both sides of the issue. We might want to mention the Charles River Watershed and some of the other groups on the one side and the Save the Dam people on the other side. And basically, acknowledge that this is not going to please everybody, and we're doing the best we can here. So I think that's about it.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, David. Appreciate that. So for those of you who have not been trying to draft things in the last few days, as you hear the key elements that are being put into text here, do you have questions? Do you hear any gaps or not hear them? As the case may be, key things we should be including, or does this sound like it makes sense? Feedback?
I just want to thank the group that's putting the information together and kind of sharing the comments of the public. It's certainly difficult to synthesize 16 months of information and try to get it into a document that's as concise as possible. So appreciate the comments from Jillian earlier, recognizing that the document might have to be a little bit bigger than we were kind of hoping to be, but I do think it's important to be able to share what we've heard with the select board to help them inform their decision going forward. And it sounds like it's gonna require a little bit more than we originally intended, but I think that's okay. So thank you for all your efforts in putting that together.
Thanks, John.
Have you shared with Martin the aesthetic paragraphs that we wrote so that the language is kind of comparable and his comments will be in dialogue with those?
I think, yeah, we'll share with all of you who are drafting so that it kind of makes sense. And we can maybe use the same headings so we can share different perspectives on a similar topic, right? There are many conclusions to draw. Thank you, Janine. Becca.
So I don't know if it's appropriate to ask, but I'm just curious, David, when you shared the statement, sort of in the draft form, there was a comment that you made, and maybe I missed some nuance, but it was around not that you don't feel that the committee fully engaged or involved abutters. And I'm missing the language that you actually shared, but it jumped out to me because I wanted to hear more about sort of, from my perspective, it seemed like abutters had a very large voice, both from a comment perspective and on the committee here. So I want to understand that, because I felt like it wasn't really a representation of what my experience was and how we went through this process. And not that we need to agree, obviously, with that opinion, but I also don't want it to misrepresent what I think we did in the process, if that's clear.
Martin, do you want to respond to that, since it was I think a question?
David can respond first.
Yeah.
David, go.
Yeah, I mentioned it. I think that actually Martin and I had both talked about that. No, I recognize. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm seeing something set different. Okay. Yeah, I recognize that they talked with the butters. I'm just I'm gathering from some of the letters that we've seen since that. It just seems to me that several of them feel like they weren't consulted. So that's the basis for what I was saying.
And actually, my feeling on this is that the abutters, actually, I wouldn't limit it to abutters. I would say that all of the people in the Save the Dam movement, had a lot of feelings about the dam, and people, I don't think, many people, I think, didn't give them deference. Like, kind of, we know what's good for you, and saving the dam is not good for you. Whereas this is something that they felt was important, and it's something we need to acknowledge, I think.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, David. Mike, and then Dirk, and then Claire.
Yeah, I just want to bounce off that last, because I think it is a perception. I mentioned to it on the last meeting too, is kind of, I feel empathy for public input in this format, because you do throw in an email or even speak for 2 minutes, and then there's no give and take, there's no response, so it's very unsatisfying, I can see. So, and even my participation as a member of the committee, I had to get used to, because I'm used to different kind of meetings where things are challenged immediately, we work them out, we move on. So in such a big community participating, I just don't think that's possible. So I think it is what it is. But I certainly, as I mentioned last week when I did talked about this, is that I really did read every email, every input. I listened to people, and I get it. David mentioned that that maybe there's a perception we're not giving enough importance to people who think, hey, this just is real important to me as a space. It means a lot to me. But I do give importance to that. This is not a light decision. It was weighed heavily. I climbed out on those rocks as kids. I fished from Holyoke Island. I proposed to my wife at the spillway. My whole family has a relationship to this, going back to my grandfather. So I get that, but I also see what it is. It's a man-made structure that in 2022, we've got a real decision in front of us. Not an easy one, but a very well-informed one. So I don't know how, if I believe what I believe, I came to my conclusion, but that doesn't mean I don't see the other side. And just the Martin, that one little point it's not a little point, but the point of 22 Pleasant Street, I get that. That would have been certainly great. But I think, you know, as we look at it, if the select board and town meeting is wise enough to look at this opportunity to develop this as a park system, there's places to drop in, you know, on the we'll call it the east side of Pleasant Street, right along the ball fields. We can make a nice little drop-in area there. There's plenty of places. 5 Auburn Street. We could tuck something in there. You know, so that's why I mean, looking at this as, okay, this is what we have, a portion of the river that's going to change. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but the water is going to be shallower. It is going to be at times, or it's going to be faster, and at times probably only one-way navigable. So how do we get the community in that condition? Do we make a drop-in up along Route 16, or, you know, something like that above this area, above the footbridge, and one below? Or is there an opportunity within this zone? But it's not something we know. And I think it'll be, I'm excited about the navigability, because I think it's, you know, I'll be able to go from Medfield to Needham. And that's an exciting opportunity. And I'm sure the fish feel the same way. So, but I really appreciate David and Martin, your comments. And I hope that we can maybe, you know, incorporate in even the overall document the spirit of those concerns. So that's it.
Thanks, Mike. Dirk, and then Claire.
Thank you. I think we should, you know, think twice and 3 times and then again and again. Before we go too far in articulating the business about outreach / participation. We live in a town where if 16, that's considered a huge victory, a huge success. I've seen it in other aspects of my public service in town.
Can you repeat? We didn't, you were cut off. We didn't hear you, Dirk.
Let me turn off my video and see if that helps.
Yep, better.
Okay. I think, let me start from the beginning. I think we should go maybe a little lightly, or think twice, 3 times, and then again and again before we do too much in treating the topic of outreach / participation. We live in a town where if 16 to 18% of voters turn out for a standard municipal election, that's considered a huge success. We live in a town of people who, most of whom, though certainly not all of whom, work somewhere else. And even if they work here, they've got a lot of busy lives for a variety of reasons: family reasons, recreational reasons, service reasons, as well as career reasons. We've got a population that, and we can certainly cite counterexamples and wonderful people who give sustained civic attention, more sustained than I can with my other competing needs in my life. But those are not most of us. Most of us tune in when there's something going on that we care about. And if it is late in a process that has been publicized and has been communicated through channels that we may not pay constant or reliable attention to, we don't always, some of us blame ourselves for not having paid attention sooner. Some of us are drawn to the idea of somebody else should have, you know, brought this to my attention. I'm not sure that we want to, more than acknowledging feelings, and there is a feeling when when you don't tune in until late in the process for whatever reason, and particularly when you don't tune in and a consensus is developing around something contrary to your preference, there is definitely a feeling, and I think it's important to be sensitive to that and to be grateful for our neighbors with whom we differ. But I just think we don't want to go too far down that road, because there's a lot to unpack there. And I mean, you know, you can get into splitting hairs, and you can never arrive at a satisfactory summary position on what should have happened. You know, from the inside, this seemed like a very well communicated and well structured and energetic outreach to the community. That can only ever go so far in my experience. I've seen it in other aspects of my public service as well. People have other lives going on, and if they regret it when they get involved late in the process, I'm not sure we should be, I think we should stop short of self-flagellation with regard to the outreach that was done on this. I think it was a pretty good process, as processes go. And municipal processes are only part of the lives that our fellow citizens all live in town.
Thank you, Dirk. Claire.
I just want to echo some of, I think, what the points that Dirk was making of, I'm concerned about committee members sort of dissenting the process that a lot of folks sort of agreed to at the beginning of this in our memo to the select board. I definitely understand the feeling of regretting something that maybe you should have been more aware of as it was happening, as the end of the process is approaching. I know certainly I live in Boston, I see it sort of happen on a regular basis, and to happen to me all the time. Things are happening in my neighborhood that I wasn't fully aware of, and I maybe wish I'd been able to get involved sooner. But we did do, and I think Jillian mentioned this in the comment, we did door stuffers on all of the abutting streets, both upstream and downstream, and we did certified mailing invitations to the direct abutter meetings that were held early on in the process. So I think the town has made a really consistent effort to engage with the direct abutters to the impoundment area and the downstream area, because we understand that their voices are an important part of this process. I think that the community engagement surveys show that, you know, people were aware and engaged in this process. You know, almost 1,000 survey responses is pretty unheard of for a municipal engagement process, at least the ones that I've been involved in. So I do think that we made a really concerted effort at getting in touch with these folks. And I definitely understand if they sort of thought, you know, well, other people will be involved, so I don't need to be involved. But I do want to make sure that our report doesn't go against a process that was agreed upon by the committee sort of at the beginning of this whole process, and that was updated as we got feedback from community members.
Thank you, Claire. And let's take Martin and Becca, and in a couple minutes, we're going to shift toward what we're doing next. And I just note, like, this is our first time we've just been talking, you know, tonight about, okay, if we're going in this direction, what does it mean, right? What does it mean we've done or haven't done, and what's important to us? Martin, go ahead, and then Becca.
Yeah, I'm confused about who was criticizing the process. I don't think I did, and I don't think David did. Okay, maybe someone can enlighten me, but what my concern was that the people in the Save the Dam movement felt they weren't listened to, perhaps because we were already really on a train, and the train was going, and it wasn't slowing down when they tried to hop aboard. And it doesn't really matter whether they started participating at the beginning or the middle of the end. I think there was a bunch of experts that were pointing us in one direction, and we were kind of following that and kind of giving more credence to the experts than to the people that were not of that opinion. But that's, you know, that's a different story.
Becca and then Jillian.
I just, jumping off one of the things that what Claire just said, I think one of the things that has been sitting with me since watching the recording last week of the meeting, and thank you to all of you for making an interesting recording to listen to, was Janine's comments, because I believe that I really appreciate how she showed both sides in that struggle, and I've been thinking since then that that's what I'd like to capture in a statement of, we recognize this, but this, we recognize this, but this, because I think, to Claire, to your, something you just said reminded me of that piece of we did look at all of these things, and that this is where the ideas came from. So there you go.
Thank you. Jillian.
Yeah, just briefly, I did want to speak to your point, Martin, about the Save the Dam people and engaging them. And I wanted to point out that our committee actually did a lot of work after hearing from residents that are part of leaders in that group early on. So I don't know if you remember, but there was a town meeting article that was proposed in the fall that asked for the committee to research potential ways to save the trees on the dam. And we heard from a lot of people about that in the process, and we were able to work with the town to fund that. So we spent money on a study to explore that. We also spent money on landscape architects to develop concepts in response to a desire from that group and others as well, but those were specifically requested by the leader of that group through the town meeting article. So I do want to emphasize what Claire said, which is I felt like we worked really hard to engage everyone. We couldn't engage directly one-on-one with everyone who signed that petition that we received, but we received a lot of letters on both sides. And I think, to Becca's point, if our report indicates that there was give and take, and there was it wasn't an easy, decision or recommendation. And to Bill's point earlier, Bill McDowell, is not something I think any of us are enthusiastic about recommending. None of us wanted to, came into this world to say, we want to take down the South Natick Dam, right? Like that wasn't a goal of any of us. But we're here and we're dealing with the circumstances that we're in. And so we're trying to make the best decision we can now. But yeah, I think we're both the dissenting or the minority point of view and the majority point of view are works in progress, right? And so my suggestion to those working on the minority report is to make sure that, your concerns are heard, but I would ask you to please, not question the process, because I feel like that creates that, that maybe hurts the report as a whole.
Okay, let's go to, thank you, Jillian. Let's go to Mike.
Yeah, just quickly, that group that became very visible has always been there, but with the signs and the really push there. And I've personally met with three, one of the leaders and two early signatories to that group. I met with them for coffee, I think a month and 3 weeks ago. And they have concerns. I think they have concerns like David and Martin have concerns. I think they have concerns like maybe a lot more of us have. But everything's weighed in on whatever scale we use in our own internal measuring device. So the dissent, whether it's the dissenting voice or the meetings I had with some of those folks from Save the Dam, I think will and should inform us as we go forward. This is not like this committee is coming up with this perfect thing that everyone's going to dance around. This is going to be an ongoing iterative process of voices, and there'll be plenty of times where those voices can be heard. And I do, like I said last week, I really commend that group for raising the awareness amongst more of the community, because it was always amazing to me of people that I know in our neighborhood that drive by that spillway every day, even as recent as last month, if son, like, you're going to do what? Like, what's going on? So it always amazes me. So anyway, I think it's a good thing that the voices are there and we're listening, and somehow in the report that their concerns should be addressed appropriately. And like I said, it's going to be, their concerns are real. and they're probably shared with people on this committee. So I think as we go forward, whether it's through the design process, I know more studies are needed, part of the permitting process. I think that'll answer a lot of people's concerns. So I think these things will come out, and that's it.
Thank you. Thank you all.
This is Aaron. Sorry,
Aaron, jump in.
My raised hand
I'm
thing is
sorry.
not working. So in the process section, I think that there is going to be a lot of opinion in the community, which, probably hasn't sat in on 13 meetings and read all the material or gone to the website. So I really think it's important in that process section to maybe have a subsection about the outreach, that we did mailings, that we had opportunity, that feedback breakout sessions that we did, that we had public comment, that there's always been the website out there where you could go and read the material or watch the sessions that did occur. There was, I think, a lot of opportunity for people to get engaged, whether they did or didn't, doesn't stop them from having an opinion. But I think we got to make it very clear that, all the steps that we did take to try to let people know that this was going on. And again, that it wasn't, someone made a comment of, I think that, I don't know, I think everybody from my standpoint came in with an open mind, let's look at this and see where the facts take us. And that led us a little way. I don't think it was predetermined from the outset. I think it took us 13 meetings to, hear from everybody and get everybody's opinions and thoughts and counter arguments to ultimately come to a decision.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm going to end this part of our conversation. Thank you all for sort of thinking through what are the key things, to acknowledge. I felt like some of you, it was important to just say and think through out loud together some of what we did, how we did it, why we did it. And also that informs what goes into writing now, right? So you'll see, we'll work to pull from your wisdom and try to capture kind of cleanly what we did and why, and especially acknowledge the challenge of making this decision, because there are strong feelings and reasons that people want different things for this. Let's talk about what happens next for a few minutes, and then we'll do final thoughts as usual. I will just laugh at myself for imagining this might be a shorter meeting, because there's a lot to talk about. There continues to be a lot of Janine laughing at me too. I can see, I like it. All right. Here's what's happening next as imagined. As you all know, we're kind of feeling our way through this. So this is a little bit in pencil, but here's what we think it's going to look like. We would like a few of you to work on the next draft. It doesn't have to be the same people. It just has to be a somewhat small group, because we can't be deliberating outside of the public forum. So please feel free to let us know now if you'd be willing to do some writing and editing. And maybe the hands are volunteers. So I see Becca, thank you, and Claire, yes, thank you, and Bill, great. That might be sort of a good basis. And then we'll also keep working with David and Martin on the piece that they're working on, and we'll work to knit all of that together. So the committee will get in a couple of weeks, I think, really to give us time to comb through all this and do a really good job. A draft report will give you then a week or two to review it and give us any edits, probably, unless somehow it's magically perfect, which you should tell us. If it's perfect, that's great. But I think give comments to CBI individually then at that point on what you see and any adjustments that are needed. And we will put out a subsequent draft. And then in probably early September, end of August, early September, something like that, meet to hold a vote on this newer, iteration. And anyone who is not able to make it will be able to email us comments ahead of time to be read into the record to affirm kind of where each person stands on that. maybe that's a quick meeting, I say, knowing what I just said 30 seconds ago. And then that report goes to the select board, and we invite you to think about, committee members, think about if you would be willing to help volunteer to give that presentation. I know a couple of you are good presenters. You know who you are. And also some of us know that's not us, right? So if you would be willing and interested to speak on behalf of the committee and help the select board understand what's in their hands, when the time comes, just put that in the back of your mind. We'll ask for that a little later, and we'll have people sort of developing that content to synthesize and present. And we hope everybody on the committee will attend that select board meeting. If you're at all able to show your support, answer questions, all of that. That is, and then John, do you want to say what happens after the select board meets?
Yeah, Ona, so once the recommendation goes to the board, then, the board, I think, once they have that report and they get a presentation from the committee, they'll certainly want some time to review and digest that recommendation before determining kind of a path forward or next steps with it. But they've certainly looked at this committee to provide a recommendation to them, so that can help them inform the decision that will be in front of them. So, this is the step where it then gets handed over to them for them to kind of commence their work. They'll likely have some additional follow-up questions. They'll need to digest stuff. I don't want to speak for them, but something like this, because it's such a significant thing, will likely take them a couple of meetings to be able to digest and reach out and ask some questions themselves before deciding on a path forward.
Great, thank you. Other next steps, we'll produce a meeting summary. We'll send a slightly revised summary from the last meeting, and we'll post the recording from this meeting as always, so people can catch up. Maggie, am I forgetting any obvious next steps?
I don't think so, no.
Thank you. And that means we are ready to do our closing thoughts circle like we always do. Let's start with Becca and then David Lotting.
I don't really have any closing thoughts.
Thanks.
Yeah, there you go. I don't have any closing thoughts today. So there you go. I'll pass it. When does that happen?
David Lotting and then Mike.
Yeah, well, after what, half a year off, this seems like kind of a fire drill here to try to get it all put together. But I look forward to helping.
Thank you. Mike and then Dirk.
Yeah, this was a great meeting. A lot of great, thoughtful piece of information that the drafters will have to work with, and I look forward to the 50-page report.
Dirk and then John. Dirk, you're muted.
Thank you. And am I coming across, or do I need to?
You sound
get
okay.
the video off?
You're good.
Sound okay, good. I remain hugely impressed with my fellow advisory board members. And I think the process has been well conducted. I do like the idea that that the report is stronger for acknowledging.
Oh, now your audio is now your audio is glitchy.
Okay, I do like the idea that the report will be stronger for acknowledging reality in certain ways. I just think it would be, to the extent that the reality is that there's always something more that anybody could do. When there's less than complete early participation. I think we should be careful about, as somebody else has mentioned, about undermining confidence in what I think has been a well-conducted process.
Thank you. John and then Martin.
Just another kind of good meeting that I think we've had, and certainly a lot of work that everyone's put on. I think it's important that as the group that's preparing the report continues forward, there's always kind of there's a path in terms of how we got here, right? It was deliberation, it was conversation, it was looking at the information that's provided. And, I'm hopeful that the people preparing this report for the recommendation for the board, will weigh in those kind of varying opinions, and how we were able to get to consensus on different items, because it was a bit of a process. So again, just appreciate everyone's efforts and the work that you're doing to get this report together for the group to review and make a final recommendation to the board.
Thank you. Martin and then Chris.
Yeah, I also felt it was a little unrealistic to expect we would have the perfect report in 1 week, of which a couple of days we're kind of preparing for drafting and 5 days drafting. But we're on the road now, and I also think that in 5 more meetings we will have a perfect report that we can all agree to, but I don't think we're going to get to that point. Hopefully we'll have a very, very good report then. And the one particular thing I was encouraged at is kind of recognizing the diversity of opinions in the report itself, so that it really does portray where we're coming from and what we ended up with. And that's, I don't think we'll need to, that should not undermine where we're going. It should, I think, just strengthen it, hopefully.
Thank you. Chris, and then Jeremy. Wait, yes.
Yeah, and I'd like to champion the fact that I came in this process. It was on my radar, but I came in this process about halfway through, and not even halfway. And you guys, I know I've added a lot more content than I could ever hope to have done. But I think it's been transparent. I think it's been engaging of the community. It's not a outcome that 50% of the people want. It's not an outcome that the other 50% necessarily want. It's it's compromise, and I hope that we move forward and get past the feelings, the hurt feelings, because I think we've got a good plan started. So with that, I'll mute myself.
Great, thank you, Jeremy, and then Jillian.
Thank you. Not too much to add here at the end, but I wanted to thank you all, and I really appreciate everybody's advocacy and support for some future investments in the park facilities in the area. So thank you, speaking my language and helping support our future goals. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jillian, and then Janine.
I would echo Dirk in saying that I really am impressed by this group of people. One thing that I've been especially impressed about with this group is the open-mindedness, if that's the right way of saying it, of everyone. I feel like I witnessed people really like learning throughout the course of this process and being open to having maybe their own like notions about how something would work expanded based on what they learned from experts. And I found that incredibly gratifying, because I feel like it's really difficult often to be open. And so I appreciated that about this group. And I look forward to getting the report done and seeing you guys in person sometime, and not just in these Zoom meetings. So thank you.
Here, here. Janine, and then Kristen.
I think it's been a wonderful experience, using my head this way, learning, and now trying to summarize the recommendation. Parks are a common ground, and we know from all loving the dam and the spillway all these years that we all want the future to look and mean something worthy of our love. And I think this group has done a lot to promote that. And the report, if you want me to help on that anymore, let me know.
Thank you. Kristen and then Bill.
I don't know where to start. There's a lot to say. There's a lot I'd like to express that words can't really do. So kind of in the spirit of what Jillian shared, I hope to see you all at the river someday. And we could use the river as a metaphor again, like it's meandering spirit and diversity of community. And yeah, just the process kind of feels like traveling that river, and it's not always easy. And it'll make you, it'll make you work and think and appreciate and connect and just have that appreciation for all of you. And then just especially at this point in the process, appreciating the folks who are guiding it and completing this and really putting in that energy to the report and the documentation. It's so critical. And yeah, thinking about the longevity of that river and how long it's been around and how long it will continue to be there. The folks who will care for it in the future, this will be part of that memory. And so it's been just a lot of gratitude to being with you all through this. I appreciate the heart that everybody's given to it. Thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. Bill and then Aaron.
How come I have to follow Kristen? That got me all choked up. I've acknowledged people as far as this process has gone for all their time and their effort. I really appreciate it, but I also want to just give a shout out to you, Ona, and to Maggie for moderating this and keeping this moving along at a pace. I really, really appreciate that. There were 3 phrases that I heard during this acknowledgement that really kind of cracked me up. One was acknowledge reality from Dirk. I appreciate that. That's great. I'm hoping this report acknowledges some reality. A bit of a process from John Marshall. Yeah, it has been a bit of a process. And a perfect report from Martin. So the result of this will be the report, and it will meander as it will, just like the river. But I really want to thank you guys for all your time. And I really think this has been kind of a neat process, and I hope other things in town follow a process very similar to this.
Thank you, Bill. Aaron and then Claire.
Yeah, I've been really impressed as well with this committee and how it's been run. I mean, considering the breadth, the depth, and the complexity of the content that we've had to go over the last 16 months, and just, all the perspectives and opinions of all the committee members, I think has really added to this process and been a real value add. So, I thank everybody for their participation, and, I think we'll ultimately do, formulate what's best for the town in this space.
Thanks, Aaron. Claire.
Just again, a thank you to all committee members and the members of the public who turned out, even knowing that they were not going to have an opportunity to speak at this meeting. I appreciate how engaged everyone has really been with this whole process. I'm looking forward to sort of wrapping things up, however long it takes to get the report done. But I think that this committee has put in quite a bit of effort, and I think that effort has been really well served for the community.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We will be in touch about scheduling for a next meeting. Maggie and I appreciate you and all of your work, and have a great evening. Everybody go get some food, and we will see you soon. Thanks all.
Thank you, Anna.
Everybody.